Hello, this is Adrian. The talk I gave on science and the Bible in Székesfehérvár a couple of weeks ago has just managed to get onto YouTube, and one or two of my English-speaking friends have said that it was a pity it wasn't in English. So my thought was that there's lots and lots of information on science and the Bible already available in English, and my hope was to get this across to the Hungarian-speaking audience, young people who may be interested. But I did give a trial talk on this subject in Bangor, in the AOG church in Bangor, North Wales, just after Christmas last year, and there was a sound recording made of that, not a video. But what I've tried to do is compile the sound recording with the presentation slides and put that together into a video. And I'm afraid the quality isn't too good. It's also the first time I gave the talk, so it doesn't flow very well. But I hope at least it's enjoyable and useful for you. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for coming between Christmas and New Year. Well, yeah, how do I start? This material that I'd like to try out on you is something that I believe God has been telling me to prepare for young people, because the idea that the Bible is true as far as creation is concerned is something that is undermined by modern scientific theory, and I'll get on to why that's a problem during the talk. But if we can... Okay, my first theme, my first topic is creation, evolution, and the Bible in connection with dinosaurs. I don't know if it'd be best to turn off the lights at the front, possibly, so we can... Is that okay? Sort of, you can see... Most of it's basically pictures and just a few texts. So, well, the picture here, just a picture of the beginning of the Bible, Bereshit, that's in the beginning. The Bible says in the beginning God created everything, not very long ago, and there's a picture of some dinosaurs. Scientific theory says dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, long before man ever came on the scene. And therefore the Bible really shouldn't... The Bible was written by man just a few thousand years ago, so it shouldn't really say anything about dinosaurs. So we'll see, actually, the way things are. So let's look at something about dinosaurs. According to evolution, dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. So they lived, according to the evolutionary timescale, which I don't agree with, they lived approximately 200 till 65 million years ago. And... then they died out for some reason. No one really knows why. There are lots of theories. One is that an asteroid hit the Earth and blanketed out the atmosphere, and they all died out, and various things like that happened. But what really happened is the question that I'd like to look into. Okay, so what do we Christians think about this? Okay, a couple of things I put. I mean, some Christians say, oh, they never existed, really. They're just imaginary. Okay. Carry on. Okay. So, is it not loud enough, or can you... Can everybody hear and can everybody understand me? Please put your hand up. Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. Good. Yes, yes. Okay. I've heard some Christians say Satan put the bones in the rocks in order to deceive us into thinking that these creatures existed millions of years ago. I don't think Satan is powerful enough to do that. So we don't need to have anything to do with them. We don't even need to think about them. Or possibly they really did live millions of years ago, and the first bit of the Bible is unreliable. I don't believe any of those things, actually, but let's carry on. So what did Christians... When did dinosaurs really live then, and what can we say about them? Okay. The word dinosaur, okay, is not mentioned in the Bible or in secular history, we can say. However, the word dinosaur was only invented by Richard Owen in 1841. Now, Richard Owen was the curator or the president or something of the British Museum of Natural History around the early part of the 19th century. And he was, in fact, a creationist, and he didn't believe in evolution. In fact, it hadn't even been brought up by that time. But he was a creationist. He believed in the Bible. But they came across these bones, these fossils, these huge bones which were unidentified at that time, and nobody knew what they were. And he said, oh dear, these must have been terrible lizards. He said, oh, that sounds a good name, but it sounds stupid in English, so let's translate it into Greek and say Dinosaurs, which would be terrible lizard in Greek, and that's where we get the idea, that's where we get the word dinosaur from. But it wasn't invented until then, okay? However, what are mentioned in secular history and in art are dragons, okay? There are lots of references to dragons. In historical writings, legends, artwork, modern sightings possibly, and even, at least in the authorized version of the Bible, dragons are mentioned a couple of times in the Old Testament, and of course in the book of Revelation, but then that's symbolic. Okay, so we have dragons. So I want to look at one or two occurrences of dragons in these various different parts, these different sections, okay? In historical writings, for example, very old writings, Herodotus was a Greek historian, 5th century BC, and also Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, 4th century BC. They mention in their time there were flying reptiles known in Arabia, Egypt, and Ethiopia, and they described the places where they were. They described the habits of these creatures, how they, the people didn't like them very much because they were grave robbers and they used to attack people. And so, of course, the picture is not from Herodotus or Aristotle, but there were flying reptiles in these in these ages, according to these writers, and they describe them not as legends or anything like that, but actual factual history. Okay, Alexander the Great. Okay, I've got a text here. Alexander the Great reported that when he conquered parts of what is now India in 326 BC, his soldiers were scared by the great dragons that lived in caves. Okay, again, it's okay, we know about Alexander the Great. I'm sure he was a Macedonian, Greek warrior who decided he wanted to conquer the world, and he went all over, conquered a great part of the known world at that time, went towards the east, Egypt, and the Persian Empire he defeated, and also even got as far as India, and this is what he found in India. And again, this is reported as a factual event, that there were dragons living in caves, and the soldiers were frightened by them. Okay, again, no drawings. The drawing is a modern idea, but this is reported at that time. Okay, Marco Polo. Okay, he traveled to Mongolia and China in the 13th century. He was an Italian, and he wrote about his travels. And again, he writes quite factually about the fact that there are certain areas in China where people don't like going because there are lots of dragons and they're frightening and they attack people. And he mentions, for example, that the Chinese emperor, on special occasions, would have his chariot drawn by dragons in the great processions, just as a factual thing. And in fact, there's lots of course, we know that in China there's lots of dragon lore and dragon culture, but there's medieval Chinese medicine and Chinese recipes actually call for dragon bones and things like that to be added to the recipes, just as completely factual, not as though these were legendary creatures at all, but as though they were actually real. Okay. Now, an Italian farmer, 1572, so in the 17th century, in the 16th century in Europe, this is in Italy, there is a factual account of a farmer who was on his way to market or something, and he heard a strange hissing sound, and then out of the bush came this small dragon, which quite frightened him, and so he killed it. And but he kept the body, and he presented it to a museum, and they had it stuffed. And so it's written, it's actually documented of exactly what this thing looked like, and it has been identified as probably being a Tanistropheus, which supposedly lived 200 million years ago. Of course, again, the numbers are not necessarily accurate. Okay? Okay, so those are the, factual historical records which talk about dragons, and sometimes they have descriptions. Okay, legends. Of course, there are legends of dragons. If you go back to Sumeria, Epic of Gilgamesh, as far as the 3rd millennium BC, there we see Gilgamesh killing a lion, but he actually also fought dragons and killed them. Okay. Next, St. George and the Dragon, of course, the patron saint of England, St. George, who was a real Roman soldier. He wasn't actually English. I'm not quite sure how he ended up the patron saint of England, but he was a Roman soldier in the 3rd century. And in order to protect a town or to save a maiden or something, I'm not quite sure exactly of the legend, he reportedly fought and killed a dragon. And there are lots of legends like this. There's not just one. There's lots of legends of medieval warriors who, in order to prove their worth, they went out and they killed a dragon that was terrorizing the countryside. And in some of the very early paintings, actually, this dragon is stylized. Of course, it's the usual typical stylized dragon with wings and fire breathing and everything. But in some of the earlier ones, they look more like, possibly resemble things like a Tyrannosaurus or something like that. Okay. Okay, I mentioned this one, Klagenfurter Lindwurm. Lindwurm is like a kind of dragon, terrible dragon in German. This is in Austria, in Klagenfurt, and this monument is in the main square. The monument is 1590, not the legend. But there's a legend that there was a dragon that lived in a swamp, and it was terrorizing the countryside. And some brave warriors went out and killed the dragon, and then they founded the city of Klagenfurt. So this is just fairly typical of a lot of European legends. The reason I mention that is that I've been there, so I saw that myself. Not the dragon, the statue. Okay. So I think that's possibly the end of the first